A great example was, yes, I was in the right place at the right time back in 1994. No question there. I missed the boat on social media. And the reason I did is because that's when I just didn't really care about business. And honestly, I thought it was kind of stupid, and I still kind of do. Like, why do I have to tell everybody everything I'm doing every minute of the day? Or why do I have to read about what everybody else is like? I don't care about this. Yeah. And I don't care about your political opinion or your opinion on this. So I never really got into that. I don't think
there's regrets. Yeah.
But it's there. I mean, obviously it's there, and it was absolutely huge. But that boat I missed, because besides just not seeing it, I think the window of opportunity wasn't open for me. I wasn't looking. I was perfectly content doing what I was doing at the time, and that just kind of passed me by. But when AI came around, I said, no, I'm not missing this one again.
Hello and welcome to Pathways. I am your host, Amber Stitt. And today we welcome Dr. Bo Bennett to the show today. Welcome, Bo.
Thank you. Good to be here, Amber.
Before we dive into the background on Bo, I think, maybe it's a rumor. I'm not sure. The rumor might be that potentially you're a little funny, potentially a little humorous. And is that a fact or fallacy? Let's kick off with that. What do you think? How do you answer that?
It's a fact, according to me, a fallacy to everybody who knows me. No, my comedy sense is in my writing. So if you're expecting me to be a stand-up comedian and be hilarious on the interview, I'm probably not. You're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I'm not off the cuff. My brain holds too much here. I can't articulate sometimes. The conversations are easier for me.
Right.
You channel that into your writing. I wanted to lead with that because I know that you focus, a lot of your business life has been part of the critical thinking and a focus there on just how people, maybe how their brains work and how we foresee a perception of how the reality is in front of us. I want to talk about that a bit. Talking about you, but I've also heard that there was a younger person that sold his business for 20 million. So can we talk about that previous life and how in the world, what were you doing at the time to get to that point? And was it always part of this background that you have? Was it part of the critical thinking? And did that help you narrow down this business choice, or how did this happen for you?
Sure. A lot of questions there, and I'll try to remember them all. First, yes, the 29-year-old self version of me did sell a business for $20 million, and that was my web hosting company. And I did that back in 2001. And that was when, if anybody was around back then, that's when the internet was probably 2000 was at its peak. 2001 is when it was the big burst, the bubble burst. And that's when pets.com and all those crazy businesses that were funded by the venture capital firms, everyone was just throwing money at them. They realized, that's probably not a good idea because they're not making money. It was the whole idea of making money and not actually making money. That was the first big blunder that the investment markets actually made. But I was fortunate enough to actually have a deal going and being able to get out right before the bust. So it worked out pretty well for me, but not perfectly well, because that 20 million I only ended up getting, poor me. I only ended up getting about 12 million of it because 8 million, actually, the vast majority of it was all in stock in their company, this company who bought us. And they ended up going bankrupt within 6 months or something. So I was able to get enough out, but not all of it out. So that's what happened back then. And I was in the right place at the right time. I started this in 1994 when I was just out of college, and I had a lot of computer experience, and I just had to learn programming to actually create websites and learn to work with servers, because there weren't many people doing it back then in 1994. Very few people heard of the World Wide Web. So I was just in the right place at the right time, and it worked out very well. And what's interesting too, there was a lot of struggle along the way. It wasn't hey, I'm making all this money from day one. It was so many times I'm oh, geez, this whole thing is going to fall apart. A lot of problems. But it just, in the end, it turned out well. That was a big lesson for me too. Not to get too invested in the day by day stuff, because there's always going to be days when things don't go well. And it's just the big picture. I knew I was doing the right thing. I knew it was a great concept, a great business. And at the end of the day, it was. Now, the second part of your question was about the critical thinking. Yes, that's what I do now. It's pretty much all about critical thinking. I have a PhD in social psychology, but my interests and passions has started with philosophy and logical fallacies like critical thinking and argumentation, and then moved into cognitive biases. So there's a lot going on, a lot of interactivity between these different disciplines. But that didn't start until probably like my mid to late 30s.
Okay.
And that's interesting. Prior to that, I was raised with gurus like Tony Robbins, Mark McKay, Dennis Waitley, Zig Ziglar, all those guys with the motivation and the success tapes. I used to love that stuff. I'm not going to say that that was the reason for my success. In fact, I think it's a correlation thing, not a causal thing, meaning that I was the type of person. I grew up in a household where my whole family were entrepreneurs, and that's all they ever talked about. They only ran their own business. So like running your own business was encouraged by my parents. I had a lot of help from my father and my mother with advice. And so that's what really got me interested in the tapes. And I say that because it's really kind of a contrast to critical thinking. I still like this stuff, like the motivational. I think it's entertaining. It gets a lot of people going, gets them hyped up and gets excited. But it's kind of like I've never snorted cocaine, full disclosure, but I'm assuming that's what it's like. You take a snort of cocaine. I watch the movies and they go crazy and it's the best. And then you get like a quick, like you're down after that. And that's kind of what the motivational material is. It's like a snort of cocaine. What's more important was the science behind that to me. Yeah. All this stuff that I'm hearing about success, about leadership, about management, about finance, about achievement. How can I separate the raw stuff? There's a lot of metaphysical stuff in there, just believe it and it'll come to you.
Sure.
And separate that from the actual science of it. And I knew there was science to it. So that's what really kind of pushed me in the direction of going back to school after I got my degree in marketing and going back to school 10, 15 years later for my PhD in psychology.
I was curious, when did that happen? Thank you.
Yeah, it was a while after. And only then was I really into critical thinking and focused on that because I saw the power of what it can do in relationships, in business, critical thinking and politics and religion, like in everything. Like critical thinking is such an important part of how we live, or at least it should be, in my opinion.
Okay. Can you define critical thinking and then pull that into what you define as humanism?
Sure. So critical thinking is probably best defined as the ability to carefully and systematically process information, as opposed to what we normally do on a day-to-day basis is we just take it in. We don't think very hard about it. We don't put a lot of cognitive resources to the information that we take in. So that's like the lack of critical thinking. That's like somebody tells us something and we say, okay, if we like the person, we say, okay, sure, I believe you. If we don't like the person, we say, I don't believe you. Or similarly, if we like the source, let's say it's our favorite news station and they say some things, we believe it because we like the source and it's very easy and it doesn't take a lot of cognitive energy just to accept information. And same thing with rejecting information. If we turn on a channel that we don't like, a news source we don't like, and they say things, we're just like, oh, that's a bunch of crap. That's a bunch of fake news nonsense. Because it's easy for us to do that. And we don't like to expend energy. We like to conserve energy. That's the way we're structured as human beings, as biological beings. So there's that fight between getting the right information and activating your critical thinking versus your seemingly natural cycle to just not want to do that and kind of be lazy. So critical thinking takes work. It takes like knowledge to learn about the cognitive biases, logical fallacies, and then putting it all together and then activating what's called like your system 2 thinking, your higher level thinking when you're presented with information that is important and you really should activate that critical thinking for. Whereas like in many situations in life, we don't need to do that. We don't have to critically think about everything. Like when I go to the supermarket, I don't sit there and say, okay, let me figure this out. Should I have Captain Crunch or should I have Lucky Charms? And I don't like draw a spreadsheet out and it doesn't matter. It's not important. You go with what you feel like. And that's great for a lot of decisions in life, but not all your decisions.
Going back a little bit to the TV analogy, do you think it's then important for all of us to slow down, take a moment to not just have that knee-jerk reaction? All of us need to pause and say, why might I be thinking this way? And almost build a little, not consequences, but a system to some of these more important decisions. Would that be a great way to implement just like slowing it down and having a little more patience and thinking things through versus just the way we scroll and just accept what we hear from our favorite people.
Yeah, in theory, that's a great idea to slow down because that will give you time to process things. The one challenge there is that the media doesn't give us time to slow down. If you turn on a news channel, I mean, it's just like you're bombarded with information and you just don't have time to process it all. So you just like accept it for the most part. Or conversely, you might just reject it all, depending on, again, the source. So that could always be a little bit challenging, but you're onto something. Whereas if you could control the information coming in, like say with Twitter or some kind of scrolling type of mechanism, Facebook or whatever, you may be able to come across something. And what I do actually is when I am scrolling on Facebook, I see something. I'm like, I don't know about that. and I screen capture it. So I take a photo of it. So I keep on scrolling, but then I go back usually in the night or in the morning. I'll go to those screen captures and then I'll do a little research on it. Sometimes that word makes me cringe because when people say research, they usually just mean Google, right? And when they Google, the algorithms give them the information that they're looking for, and they don't know the difference, how to tell the difference between good information and bad. And they say, well, I did my research.
Yeah.
That's troubling.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of trouble as well. But,
and it's easier, but again, it doesn't make it right. And so that's really where is that definition, the logical fallacies. It seems logical, but it might not be true. Or do I have that backwards?
No, logical fallacies, pretty much that's it. When you hear a logical fallacy, most of the time it sounds really good. It sounds like it makes perfect sense, but then it's not for actual good logical reasons. One example might be the straw man, which is when your opponent brought up an argument and then it's an argument that's very difficult for you to respond to. So you just pretend they said something else, like a ridiculous version of the argument, and you argue against that version. So if you're doing this quickly back and forth, people won't even know what happened. They don't see that because they're not looking for it. They're not familiar with this straw man logical fallacy. So then when that happens, they just think he's just responding to the argument, when in fact that the other person's not responding to the argument. They're responding to a completely different argument that the other person didn't even make.
Yeah. I suppose in relationships, that's where some of the problems could stem. It started with one thing, but then it completely rolled into something else. Right. And then we're not forgiving each other for it. It could be a big problem, I suppose. You're listening to Pathways with Amber Stitt. For more episodes like this, plus so much more, check out the podcast page at amberstitt.com. Let's take action together. Now let's get back to our episode. Back in before 2001, you talked a bit about being an entrepreneur. Fast forward to today, lots of websites, lots of courses, being an author, podcaster, lots of things that you've had going on. I find it pretty interesting how much tech was there back in the day, way before people were really paying attention to it. And it sounds like you were writing some of the code outside of MySpace and feeling really cool about a copy paste code just to put your favorite song in there. That was my version. Now you come into doing a lot with AI, but you mentioned something about Google and the way that people are gathering information. So I'm really curious how you sort out the right AI from the open AI, given sometimes maybe Google's given us the wrong sources. Do you want to pick up that big one and share a little bit about how you feel?
Yeah. So this is a tough question, and this is an interesting question too. It's like, where does AI start and where does standard programming end or begin or whatever? So like one of the first AIs is Siri. Siri's been around for a long time, and Alexa, that's been around for a while. And technically that is AI. It's not very smart AI, but it is. It's hard to delineate from, again, AI and just standard if-then computer coding. But for the most part, let's just say that Google or whatever other search engine somebody may choose to use uses a combination of both. And it doesn't even matter for this conversation. The point is, when you type things into the internet, like, who was the best president ever? The search engine knows a lot about you and knows your preferences and what you want to read. And you have to remember the motivations. And this isn't some like deep conspiracy. I mean, this is well known. Yeah. Their motivation is to make money. Like Google, that's what it's there for, to make money. In order to make money, they want you to click on things and click on ads and so forth. They serve you up the information that you're most likely to click on. versus information that you're going to skip. That's what they want you to see first. So that causes a big problem. And I think at least a version of that is in the court system now. Like maybe they should stop doing that because this is causing like major political rifts in our country because everybody's just in their little echo chamber.
Yeah.
We're all like little lab rats, you know, it's not really our fault. It's the way that the search engines are feeding us information. It's the way that Facebook and Twitter and everything is feeding us information. But having said that, it's not a death sentence. It's not like an educational death sentence for anybody. If you want the right information, it's out there. And you could basically retrain your search engine and the algorithms to respond to a more intellectual version of you, if you want to call it that. By, let's say, you're looking for scientific information. Well, start clicking on scientific links. Start clicking on papers, like scientific papers. Go to scholar.google. Yeah. and
I am smarter. I will do research. Give me some good stuff.
And the more like intelligent your clicks are and the information that you seek, then that's the information that's going to be fed back to you. So when you're looking for scientific information, you want scientific papers, peer-reviewed papers. And there's some like controversy there, but it's not a lot in terms of like, well, maybe that's not a really good paper. And yeah, that's the case, but it's a lot better than what you're going to be fed through a lot of like YouTube channels or something.
Yeah.
And then there's like for legal information, that gets a little bit tougher because like there's the law and then there's like opinions on the law. And lawyers, as you know, lawyers differ from scientists because lawyers are arguing for their client. They start with the conclusion and then they work backwards essentially. Whereas scientists start with the facts and the information and bring them to the conclusion, no matter where the conclusion leads. That's what science is about. But law is a little bit different where you have the lawyers, their job is to defend their clients and put up the best argument possible. So that always gets a little tricky. But when it comes to law, I'm not a legal professor. So I just kind of like to leave those things to the courts and don't get too involved in that. And then there's just like factual information. Like, did this person really say that? Did this really happen? And of course, you could check like many of the different fact check sites, but then you have people saying, oh, those are all run by the deep state or whatever. And sure. I guess if you believe that, you're so far down deep a conspiracy hole that you have a lot of work to do to begin with. But even ignoring that, even ignoring like the fact check sites, and because there's always like an element of truth to everything, the fact check sites aren't 100% all the time.
Sure.
I mean, nobody is. So it's like you pick something that's wrong and then you kind of amplify that and say, see, this is all nonsense. But that's not the way it works. You have to think probabilistically and statistically, not just taking a sample of one and drawing your conclusion on that. So there's just like a lot of little tricks when you're researching the way somebody will make a claim. Like if somebody says, this person did that, like if they're extremely clear, then it's like, ooh, that claim actually is a pretty powerful claim. And then because usually you could look it up and you could quickly either debunk it or you could see that it's actually true. But most people don't do that. A lot of things that you hear are implied claims and you have to look out for that. Like, did Taylor Swift date the whole football team in one night? I think the American people have a right to know. You know, and obviously it's just a question, right? Mm-hmm. But there's absolutely no factual basis behind it whatsoever. But when people hear questions like that, they're like, ooh, did she?
Gotta click here.
And then they assume that she did. You know, they assume that there's some truth to that when so much of the time there's like nothing. So you have to watch out for those kind of implied claims where people are legally sheltering themselves from making like a ridiculous claim or something that could get them in trouble. But they're still convincing people. So look out for that because that gets dangerous.
I mean, it's almost like being younger. It would be the tabloids at the supermarket. And you're like, you can't believe that stuff. That stuff's just wild. Well, this is what everybody, grandma, mom, all the kids, this is what we're looking at. Yeah. Every day, you know, and when it comes to those social feeds.
When I grew up, we had the Weekly World News, which was the version of, I guess, the kind of like the Onion. But the Onion, everybody knows it's a joke. But the Weekly World News, people really did believe it, including my mom, which was sad. You know, she would show me, look, aliens are running the White House, Bo. Look, it's right here.
You're like, well, when you got older, you're like, no, but it is true. No.
Right.
Very fascinating. And I love how your mind thinks. I love how you've always been innovating along the way. And I know I mentioned this to you earlier, but utilizing resources and your strengths, I would say as a business owner over 10 years now for myself, there would be these things people would say like stay in your lane. And there's certain things when it comes to having a niche and branding. But I feel that you've been able to evolve, innovate, and build other businesses as they've kind of made sense. There's been an evolution. And so let's talk about some of your businesses that you do have today. And then more specifically, we can keep talking about AI and how that can roll in and really help people and be done correctly and ethically in their business.
Sure. So as I mentioned, the first major business I did was web hosting. That got me into programming. And program is the key there because with the programming, I developed like an extremely useful skill, being able to program on the internet. I mean, there are a lot of different programs, but I used Perl, which was one of the main languages of the internet back then, the programming. That's what I used to create so many different things. So that kind of led me to being able to create software, like web-based software, which I did like in the web hosting. I built a web interface for web hosting clients when something like that didn't really exist then. I built an entire affiliate program 2 years before Amazon started theirs. No. And that was one of the big reasons for the success of the company that we had. But then after I sold, I ended up like a couple years later, I bought into a local data center in the Boston area that was going out of business. They were having financial trouble. So I bought in, I helped them turn that around and then get out and sold that. And then I was just kind of like fooling around with a lot of different ideas. And honestly, I went through probably a 10-year period where I wasn't extremely motivated business-wise. I was motivated to do a lot of different things, but not business-wise because I had enough money to keep me busy for a while. And I really wanted to learn more about psychology. So that's when, I did the whole schooling thing, and I spent like several years on debate boards and that kind of like sparked like the critical thinking, the logical fallacies. I mean, I spent a ridiculous amount of time on these different boards arguing different issues. And that's what really kind of kicked me off. Like I would read people's arguments and I knew it was just completely wrong, but it looked really good. And that's what's going on here? That's what led me to study logical fallacies and learn more about them, and then cognitive biases and how that works with our thinking. So after probably like a 10-year period of like the whole education thing, I really jumped back into business and started a publishing company, online publishing company, because it was extremely difficult to publish my first book back in 2004. And there was just like a lot of work to it. It was extremely technical. Nobody knew what to do. So that was the whole idea of the company I started. It was to help authors publish their books online through online publishing. And that evolved as online publishing evolved with print on demand and everything else we did. And eventually where it is now, there's a big AI component. I run a company called BookBud.AI that does essentially authors come to us with an idea. They type in, it's a self-serve platform. You type in your idea and it writes the entire book for you. So you can, and it publishes it. It does like everything, the covers, the whole system walks you through the whole process, but it's not like all AI, just AI generates the book. And then you have like the other elements. But the point is within like a few hours, you could have like everything done and you could be a published author, which is like mind blowing. Considering I've been in this business for 13 years now, and like nothing like this has ever been the case. And now, especially with AI voices, cloned voices, I used to narrate all my own books. I've written about a dozen books myself and narrated them all. And some of those books were like over 20 hours and my voice like, But now with AI, I clone my own voice, which sounds exactly like me. I can't tell the difference. My wife can't tell the difference. I just upload the content and within like an hour, I could have an entire book completely narrated with my voice. It's just amazing technology. It's exciting to wake up every day and work in this area.
Now, for the audience here, did you notice there was not a bunch of islands and tropical traveling maybe behind the scenes, but on a 10-year hiatus, he went to learn. So it seems like you're in the right place at the right time a lot of time, but maybe it's because you're putting in the work. Would you say that's probably true?
It's putting in the work and it's being open to opportunities. I think that's very important. A great example was, yes, I was in the right place at the right time back in 1994. No question there. I missed the boat on social media. And the reason I did is because that's when I just didn't really care about business. And honestly, I thought it was kind of stupid, and I still kind of do. Like, why do I have to tell everybody everything I'm doing every minute of the day? Or why do I have to read about what everybody else is like? I don't care about this. Yeah. And I don't care about your political opinion or your opinion on this. So I never like really got into that. I don't think
there's regrets. Yeah.
But it's there. I mean, obviously it's there, and it was absolutely huge. But that boat I missed because besides just not seeing it, I think the window of opportunity wasn't open for me. I wasn't looking. I was perfectly content doing what I was doing at the time, and that just kind of passed me by. But when AI came around, I said, no, I'm not missing this one again.
Yeah. A friend of mine the other day was talking about a book that we have, a co-author book, and she said to do a voiceover, it can take a lot of time. And recently I said, there's other ways. I sent a couple links to her. And you're talking about how you can do that now, audio and something everyone wants to read or can learn different ways. So whether they want to see it, hear it, touch it, you have all the opportunities now. So when people come to you and they say, it's unethical to do AI books, what's your comment to them on that?
It's not. I guess that's a moral judgment, like an ethical opinion. It's not something that either is or it isn't. The question I would have is, well, why? Why is it unethical? Are you using AI to write a book and then putting your own name to it and claiming credit for it? I could see the ethical dilemma there. I could see that being like a slippery slope. Are you using AI to assist you? Like, okay, AI, give me some ideas, and then you're writing the content. Are you using AI to write a book and then just using like a pseudonym? So you're not taking credit for the work. I see no problem with that whatsoever. Yeah. Where I get a lot of heat from the authors that I've been working with, with the narrators I've been working with, because we do audiobook narration. So I have a whole team of narrators that I give books to, and they do the narration. And I still do this because people still want some human, like AI isn't perfect for everything. But for the most part, they were pretty upset with me when I told them about AuthorVoices.AI, which is my narration company. It wasn't really an ethical issue. It was, this is going to hurt me. They were coming in from that defensive aspect. And not just like my company. Like my company is a tiny little piece of the sliver. I mean, AI voices, there are major companies out there. Apple's getting involved in that, and they've been involved in it for a while. And Amazon's going to get involved in it. And there are just so many companies doing this. It's just the way the industry is going. Yeah. And you could be like the guy riding the horse and buggy, yelling at automobiles and saying, oh, they're never going to take off and they're horrible and everybody should protest them. You could be that guy if you want, but you're not going to go very far and you're going to miss the opportunity. You really need to embrace this. You got to think, okay, how could I use AI to my advantage? And for like the narrators, I told them, I said, well, this is an opportunity for you to really focus on like acting, focus on the books that require that like precise type of human ingenuity and creativity and the nuances and the human voice that are very important to like a fictional type of production, as opposed to like a really dry nonfiction narration, which is perfect for AI because AI like doesn't screw up or rarely screws up. So it's just really good. So you just got to kind of rethink what you're doing. And go ahead, narrators, clone your own voice and now offer your clone voice for like 1/10 the price. Now you're making money off like a product rather than your service, and you're going to make a lot more money. So you just have to think about things a little bit differently instead of just whining and complaining about how, woe is me and AI is going to take over my job.
I had to go to the library when I was in school before Google to like get the project done, write the paper, whatever. So anybody that's using Google for their research, I mean, you're getting assistance there too. So that could be part of the argument. I mean, it's using resources and leaning in and continuing to evolve. And that's where like that idea with the narrators, you can have multiple projects going. Hello, passive income. If you have multiple things going constantly, you can leverage that. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
So to wrap up the episode, I want to close talking about some of the software program services you have. But let's tell the audience why it's pretty important for them to get their story out there and potentially have a book or two behind their name.
Well, if you're in business, I think it's like the most advanced calling card that you could possibly have, or business card, having a book. saying, look, I am an expert on the topic I profess to be. And here's why, because I've written a book on it. And you could even do that with AI. You could have AI help you write the book. It doesn't matter. But that's something that's incredibly impressive. And so that's like just one aspect of it if you're in business. But if you're not in business, I think everybody has a story that they want to get out, or they have information that's very important to them. And they would love to kind of do their part to argue their case or put it out an idea there that they believe in that is important to them. And to give you a perfect example of this, prior to AI, I have had a list of over 100 different book ideas. And there's no way in multiple lifetimes I would be able to write all these, but they just keep coming to me. So I keep writing them down. But thanks to AI, I was able to knock 50 off my list in the last 6 months, 50 books. And I didn't put my name on them. It's not from my name, but I use pseudonyms, but they're my ideas. And AI takes my idea and it writes an entire book about it and expands on it. It does an amazing job. And, that's why I've been focusing on BookBud so much, because it does such a wonderful job. But there's just something that feels really good about being able to get all my ideas out there. And I got another 50 ideas on my list, and I'll eventually get to those.
That's exciting. And I think that's the other thing too. You can think it. You don't literally need the pretty journal and a pen, and I'm left-handed, so I'm like writing it can be here, and you could be writing with your ideas and you're in brainstorming, and all of that's important. It's a lot of fun.
It is. Yep.
Okay. So people can find you many ways, obviously. Google Dr. Bo Bennett, but also we have BookBud.AI. Anything else you want to share to wrap up this episode?
Yeah, there are two basic sites because I have so many different websites.
Yeah.
One is for my businesses, and that's archieboy.com. And that's where all my businesses are linked, including BookBud, AuthorVoices, Book Marketing Pro. And the other one is bobennett.com. That's my personal website where you're going to find the books that I personally written. I don't put my AI books on there. They're just the ones that I've written.
I see. So there is multiple ways to organize the content. Some of it is for, like you said, the pseudonym, and then some is strictly that you're writing yourself.
Right.
Very neat. Well, thanks so much. I was so excited to, like I said to you, I know some of my other community had already met you personally. So thanks for being on the show today. Really appreciate it.
It's good to meet you, Amber. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pathways. For more information about the podcast, books, articles, the blog, and so much more, please visit my website at amberstitt.com. And remember, let's take action today. Thank you for listening.